In this video, we are going to cover how to create a Google form that was based on the demo session from today. The video will have multiple parts. That way, this gives you time to create your form as we progress. I do recommend before starting is to gather all the observer emails you're going to use, the observer names, teacher names, and emails, and of course the questions. That way, it's easy for you to just copy and paste into the Google form. So let's get started. In Google Chrome, all you gotta do is go to a new tab, and the fastest way is just type in forms.new, and you'll have a new form show up there. And what you can do if this does pop up, just go ahead and press cancel, and you're ready to start. So on the left side of the screen, you'll see the demo Google form that we use, and you have a template too. And on the right is a brand new one. So what we're gonna get started with is, of course, the title. Now, is this Google form going to be for a district walkthrough, a campus walkthrough, or some specific type of walkthrough? Like, let's say it's beginning of the year or middle of the year, but you can use it at any time. So we're just going to give it a generic name. I'm going to put walkthrough 2025, 2026. And when I click up here where it says untitled form, you're going to see that it copies that title as well. So that's all you have to do for the title. In the form description, of course, you can be more specific and provide more details as to what this walkthrough is all about. Next, as you can see on the demo side, I had added a fake Starfleet Academy logo banner for the campus that this Google form represents. Now you can do the same if that's how your Google form is going to be used. Again, your Google form can be used for entire districts or for a specific campus. It just depends on how you're gathering the data. Now to add an image, you would go here into the menu bar and click on Add Image that you can upload from your device, from Google Drive, and so forth. I'm going to quickly upload this banner so you can see how easy and quick it pops up. There you go. You don't have to add an image title. You can if you want to. And then, of course, is your first question. Now, in this part, we are going to talk about the date. This is important because it does show when the observation was conducted. Now, a timestamp does also capture it when you submit the Google form, but it's also good to have the date, especially when we talk about it in the AutoCAD and when we talk about it in the Looker Studio dashboard. So to add a date, just click here where it says question, change it from multiple choice down to a date. You'll see it's in this format, month, day, year. We are going to make it a required question. That's very important. So make sure that you did click that on. Another thing I would recommend is you could add, like you saw here, there was on the pull down, you could add the time the observation was made, which is perfectly fine, or you can use what's in the timestamp. So I'm going to stop right here for just a moment, give you time to pause the video and add this to your Google form. Now that you have that first part out of the way, now we're going to take care of this next section, which is the observer name and observer email. What I want you to look at, and this is just by preference, I do recommend that you alphabetize your list of observers who is doing the walkthroughs. In this example, most of them are admirals, but it is still alphabetized by last name. And the email as well. It should match the list going from A through Z, like for this example, 1 through 9 and 1 through 9. And this is very important because when you do choose to, let's say, if you want to use AutoCAD to automatically send the teachers who are being observed this observation, you have to make sure that you check the emails correctly because you have the option of sending that observation to the original observer as well. Most emails, especially in the districts, either have the first name and or the last name of the teacher or the staff member. So that will be easy to identify when you're doing observations. So in order to do this, we already have a new question here. This was the date. So what we're going to do is continue here, observation. And now we're going to add a new question by clicking add question. And I already have this on a spreadsheet. So I'm going to go to the spreadsheet. Here are my observers. I'm going to copy it, go back to the Google form, erase that, and paste. And the question is going to be the observer email. So that question is done. But as we talked about before, we are going to make this a required question. So that means it has to be filled out. Now, what we're going to do next is we're going to, let me change this to name. We're going to change, we're going to add now the observer email. So again, new question. I can go to my spreadsheet, copy that, go back. I'm going to put observer email. Then I'm going to make sure it's multiple choice. Let me erase that so it doesn't detect that. And a little hiccup right now. There we go. I'm going to do that. Now I'm going to put observer email. As you can see, Google Forms is pretty smart. It detected that you were trying to write an email. In this place, we're trying to avoid typos. So it's recommended that you use either a multiple choice or you can use a drop down here. That's the same with up here. You can use either one. Completely up to you. Drop downs will save space in the Google form, so it's not just so lengthy. So for example, here, if I do both of them as drop downs, you can see it's just here and you can choose it from there. If I do the multiple choice, change that really quick. You'll see here, this is what it looks like. So it starts becoming a little bit lengthy. This is completely up to you, how you want this Google form to look like. So again, I'm going to stop right here and give you a few minutes to update your Google form, and you can pause and then resume for the next part. Okay, now that we have the observers out of the way, we're going to work on the next section of the form. As you can see on the left side, we're going to talk about the class period, time of observation, and department. In this example, it's more aimed towards a secondary grade level, but this can be adapted for elementary as well. So for example, in this example, 1A and 1B, we have A days and B days in our schedule in secondary. But for elementary, what you can do is, again, you're going to add a new question and you can select either time of day or you can even do a time class, your actual schedule and so forth. So for example, scheduled time, let's say that you have in your schedules, you have like from 8:30 a.m. to 9:20, it's this block. 9:25 and so forth. You understand what I'm saying. So you can do that here. I'm going to just keep the class period example, and I'm just going to go again. You can redo it if you want, like it in a spreadsheet, or just type it in. So in this example, I'm just going to say AM and PM. And again, this is going to be a requirement. Everything that I put with the required is important because I do want that. This is the data that I want to capture. So again, this is optional as to you as to what you need to capture. Next, time of observation. So this is optional again. Is it at the beginning of the class, middle of the class, or at the end of the class time, or that specific period that you are actually making the observation? This is going to depend on what you're observing. If you're in a science class, let me retract that. If you're in a class during science time, did they just start that unit, or did they they're in the middle of doing activities and so forth? That's what this can do. Again, this is all going to depend on the type of data you are collecting. And last but not least, we're going to choose, instead of department, we're going to put subject. And here, I'm actually going to copy just a few of these that match elementary. And I'm going to go down here. I'm going to make this into a dropdown and make this a requirement. So now what I have in my sheet, if you want to preview it, just like I showed you before, class period, it's in the morning, and I'm observing a math class or a math subject at this moment. So what I want you to do is go ahead and pause the video for a little bit and update your Google form so we can get back to the next section. All right, now that we have that out of the way, we are going to focus on the next section. And no pun intended, we're actually going to talk about sections. So as you can see here, we finished section 1. This doesn't show up on your Google form yet because we haven't added a section. I do recommend using sections because it will help keep your walkthrough form organized, especially as the person who's filling it out. Seeing one long walkthrough form can be daunting. So if you break it down into sections, it will keep it much more organized, and people can't get lost when filling it out. So to add a section, here in the menu, you'll see these two rectangular boxes. That adds a section. And what you'll see is automatically the first section we've already worked on is titled section 1 of 2. It has the walkthrough, the image title, date of observation, and observer name. But we actually want the observer email as well in section 1. So I just click on it and drag it over here, and now it's still part of section 1. Now notice here, these two things that we just worked on are also there. Make sure you move it in case it does do this when you add a section. It's best to add a section when you're at the last question. I was still on a former question. So now that we have section 2 of 2, I can just put here the title of the section, and we'll say teacher name and email. And just like before, we're going to add a new question. And here's where we're going to be posting the teacher's names. So I'm just going to go back to my spreadsheet, just copy the first 20 that I have, go here to options. Notice that it automatically put them in there instead of typing every single person you're going to observe. Again, you can do multiple choice, or in this case, we're going to keep it with the drop down method. And we're going to put here teacher's name. And of course, we want this required. And guess what? We're going to create a new question. New question now. We're going to do the emails. Again, I recommend if you are going to do this, a spreadsheet would help when sorting it from A through Z, especially when you're trying to paste this in here. Drop down. I'm going to click here, and there are the emails. And we're going to put teachers emails. And that's pretty much it for this part. Please, 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 I recommend that you do check and triple check the staff members' names and, of course, their emails, because what can happen is if you do, like, for example, an AutoCAD option to this, when it sends an email, if it's the wrong email, like there's a typo, it will set it back. And then that means that staff member never got the email. So it's highly recommended you triple check. If you don't use it, that's okay, because then you can still use this information or this data for like, beginning, middle, and end of year. Um, when you talk with your supervisors and vice versa, it's good to have things written up correctly instead of having typos. So we're going to pause right here, give you a few minutes to catch up with the teacher's names and emails, and move on to the next section. All right, now that we have the teacher's information or the staff members that you're going to observe, we're going to move on to the next section, which is the most important one, which are all the questions. So as I mentioned before, to try to keep it nice and clean and efficient, like you can see here, if we preview it, here's what the observation form looks like. I'm just going to show you really quick. Here we go. Do recommend when you are doing the date, please train your observers to use actually the calendar and then choose today. So it automatically puts those dates. I've noticed when we've allowed people to do it manually, there are some typos and it throws off the data a little bit. So here's the teacher's name part. See, very organized and clean. You don't have to be scrolling to get there. So what we're going to do is add a new section. So again, you click on the two rectangles here. I'm going to make sure I'm on this right now. And notice it just created a new section instead of what it did last time. We're going to entitle this Walkthrough questions. Very simple and to the point. Now, what we're going to do is add a question again. And here, this is why I recommend having the questions ahead of time, especially with the team that's going to be observing. You all agreed on what kind of questions it is. If you remember from the session, I did recommend using mostly multiple choice or drop downs. As you can see in the demo, we do use the other ones, for example, checkboxes. And what happens is when it's read in Looker Studio and Google Sheets, it's like one long sentence. It doesn't break it up like it is here. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. If you just want to read what is being captured, then go ahead and use the checkboxes. You could also just say, instead of check all that apply, check only one. This is up to you. So for the first one, we're going to go into the sheet again. And the first question, I'm just going to put the answer choices here. So for example, this was classroom, actually instructional practices. I'm just going to put the title. And here's already doing multiple choice. I'm actually going to use a drop down. This is going to force only one answer. But let's say that we do see multiple things happening. Then yes, here it would be good to have checkboxes for this type of question. Again, just keep in mind the data, like for example, if I was to choose this, this, and this, it would show in one cell value learning stations, comma, peer learning, comma, technology, Schoology only. And of course, this is a requirement. So we're going to do that. And then you just keep going, adding all the questions that you have for your walkthrough form, as you can see here in the demo. And once you're finished, you're good to go. Now, this last one I do want to talk about really briefly is the feedback from observation. You can add a text only excuse me, a text only um, question. So all you do is add a question, and here instead of multiple choice, you can do short answer or paragraph. This is completely up to you. We're going to do a short answer and then just titled it feedback from observation. And notice here in the demo, we didn't make it a requirement. So that's going to be, again, up to you if you want to make it a requirement or not. Maybe the observer doesn't have any observations. This is where they would just type it in, but it will still be captured and it can still be used in data analysis and or if you use AutoCAD. So again, we're going to stop this for just a few moments to let you catch up with your Google form. Go ahead and add all your questions, and we're almost finished with the Google form. All right, congratulations. You finished the Google form. That is, I think, one of the hardest part is putting together the Google form because you're going to have all these questions and emails and names, and you want to make sure everything's correct. So what we're going to do in this part of the video is we're going to look at responsive and how to publish the Google form because right now it's ready, you're ready to share with other observers and so forth. So let's click on responses up here. And as you can see, there's 0 responses. That's good. And you'll want to take a look at right here where it says link to sheets. What we're going to do is click on here because we want to make sure that this Google form is linked to a specific sheet. Now, before we do this, this is also going to depend on what type of Google form is this. Now, in the demo, Google form is specific to one campus. If you're going to use what we talked about in the session for multiple campuses, what you're going to want to make sure is that your Google form has the name of the campus. That way, this links to the sheet that belongs to that Google form. Now, if you're going to use the Google form just as an overall walkthrough form, which you can do, like for example, back in questions, you might add another question that lists all the campuses. So depending on how you're building this Google form for your data, that's going to show how your responses are going to look like. So for this example, I'm going to just say here that this is Starfleet's Academy. Oops. Academy walkthrough for 25-26. I want to make sure this is updated, so I'm going to make sure to update it here. Starfleet Academy. Now what's going to happen is I'll change your save. Perfect. Go to responses, link to sheets. You're going to have two options. Okay. Now for, again, just to reemphasize, if you're going to have multiple Google Forms, you're going to want to build one workbook, basically. Okay. So in this example, I'm just going to build into a new spreadsheet. But let's say, for example, you had already started a spreadsheet. Let's say this is called your district level tab, but I actually wanted to add, let's say, the Starfleet Academy into the spreadsheet. You, of course, have to give it a name. So I'm just going to put district level. Okay. And what's going to happen now is you can select an existing spreadsheet. Okay. So if you're going to house them all in one master workbook that has all of them, you want this option right here. Okay. And make sure you have a spreadsheet already created that will have the multiple ones. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select, and I'm going to see that the most recent is this one. So I'm going to choose here and then click on insert. And what's going to happen now is you'll see down here, form responses 1. This is your Starfleet Academy. First thing I recommend you do is rename this to the school. Okay. And if you want, you can move around this, to keep it. But you'll notice that Google Form responses will have this little icon here, the purple icon, and the responses will be here. Okay. Now, that's your responses. What we're going to talk about now is publishing your spreadsheet. Because as you notice here, when we've actually previewed it, this says this form isn't accepting responses. Even when we fill it out, there's no submit, so it won't do anything. So what we're going to do is go here to publish and responders. That means who is going to have access to this. Now you can click on manage and you can actually add, let's say, all the administrators and or other observers who have access to this. So you can add each person's email, and depending on how your campus and district has set up your lookup, you'll show when you type in their names, their emails will show there, and then I'll start adding them here. Okay. Now, in this example, I'm just going to keep it as editor restricted, but anyone with the link can respond to this. So I would use this if you feel like it's easier. Like you can just create an email with all the observers, of course, and then just copy this email link, and then you can send it to them. So what you would do here is now click on publish. Okay. So now what's going to happen is no responses yet. Please check back later. This is now live. Okay. You can start making observations. Anyone with this link right here, you can copy the responder link. You can add it. You can copy it or shorten it if you want. Copy that and send it by email, Google Chat, make it into a QR code, however you want to do this. So let's just look at a quick little preview of what this looks like. So we're going to go here, preview. Notice that restriction is gone. It's published. This could be like how you show your other observers the mini training. Make sure that it matches the emails, the names. Choose that. Click on next. We're going to choose really quick how this looks like. And I'm just going to choose this. And I'm not going to put any responses right now. Notice that it will not allow you to do this. So in preview mode, you can do that. But that link that we have, I'm going to open a new link. I'm going to show you right now. Here it is. Notice that it's capturing my email. We're going to talk about that in our next section of how we change the settings. So when we go here, server name, next, teacher, next, we're going to choose this and submit. Now what's going to happen is if we go back to the original tab here, now responses has, hey, here is a quick overview of just one response, okay? It's showing that only Admiral Archer has responded, and here's what they've said. So this is Google Forms responses. When you go into the actual sheet, you'll notice here under Starfleet, the second row will show the responses. Now look here in instructional practices. You'll notice that when I click on here, you'll see all the responses that were gathered. Again, it's how you're going to capture the data and what you agree upon. So go ahead and set up your Google Sheet here and publish it, and then we'll get back to the next section. Right. Now that we've dealt with responses and publishing the sheet, all we're going to do next is check on the settings. Okay. So we're going to click on settings right here, and you're going to notice when you jump into it, there's three options for settings and defaults. You are not going to make this into a quiz. This is not a quiz. This is capturing information. So we're going to go down to responses here. And the first one says collect email addresses. My recommendation is to use verified. This will make the observer use their district assigned email account. So we do want that, okay? And it reduces the amount of human error, especially typos, if you select responder input, which is manually inputted the email address. Next, send responders a copy of their response. My recommendation to you is off, especially if you're going to use the autocrat option that we talk about in a different video. If you are not going to do the autocrat option, you do have the choice of when requested or always, and they'll just get a copy or what they responded in your Google form. And what the teacher will see is, the name, who observed them, all the selections, and if you added feedback, they will see that in a Google form response. Next, allow response editing. Responses can be changed after being submitted. Recommendation here is to have this off because I noticed when you do have it on, you might change it in Google Forms, but it doesn't necessarily change it in Google Sheets and vice versa. So in this case, I would extremely recommend that your editors can update any mistakes in Google Sheets here. Okay. Now I am using my personal account here. So here where it says require sign in, you may actually have another option before the limit to one response, which states restrict to users in and probably the name of your district. So let's say Houston ISD and its trusted organizations. Make sure that this is turned on because what you want to have on here again is that the observer is using their district email account, not a personal account, but their district email account. Now, for this option here where it says limit to one response, I would have that off because observers will be conducting multiple observations. Now, here in presentation, you're not going to be presenting this, but you can show a little bit of what you can adapt for the Google form. Progress bar, especially since we have like 3 sections here, you can show that or not. Make sure you have your shuffle question order off because that can mess things up. Confirmation message. Again, this is up to you if you want to edit and say thank you for your walkthrough. You can show link to submit another response. I do have this on because in case you know how sometimes observations are done like on specific days and specific times, and they go down a hall of classrooms. I would definitely have this on there. That way they don't have to search for the link that you shared or the QR code. And then view result summaries, you can have that off and disable autosave of all responses as well as off. Then at the very bottom, defaults. Again, this is going to be in case you start building other Google forms. What you want to do is just leave this as it is for right now and just change the changes here in the settings when you're conducting a brand new Google form. All right. We're almost done completely with the Google Form how-to video. We just have one more thing to go, but right now I'm going to pause so you can make sure that you have your settings almost identical to this. Remember here requires signing. You will probably have the one that says restrict the users in your district and its trusted organization. So I'm going to give you some time to update your Google Form. Right. Now that we have our settings in place, the last part we're going to talk about is adding collaborators or editors to this Google form. So I'm just going to go back to question. You can access from anywhere. You'll see this little icon here with the little person and plus sign. And this is what you do is you're actually sharing the form. Now, technically here on the owner, if I add another name, you'll be able to choose what role they have. Make sure that you choose editor and keep in mind that people that who are editors will be able to change anything on the Google form. Now, for example, you notice that this Google form is already live. So, for example, if it's already live and an editor goes in here and says, you know what, let's add another question down here. What's going to happen is when they come down here, add a question. I'm just going to put question 2 and just put yes, no, and that's it. What's going to happen now in your sheet after instructional practice, this will update. As you can see here, question 2 is over here already. Notice it's no longer in order. This is actually after instructional practices, but in Google Sheets, it just adds a new column at the end. Keep that in mind because it does keep the original questions in. Now, if you delete a question, so for example, this one here, we're going to delete question 2. You'll notice it in Google Sheets, it does stay because it was there at one point. So these are things to keep in mind. That's why I do recommend that when you're building this Google form with the people that are going to be observing, try to hash out as much of the details as possible at the very beginning. That way you have very little changes throughout the year. And what I mean by changes, more than likely the most change you'll do is updating teachers' names and or their emails. Maybe an observer leaves or they're no longer doing walkthroughs. Those are things that will be changing. Last but not least is the theme. Maybe you want to change how this Google form looks like. Over here in the palette where you see customize theme, you'll get to choose the header. You can have different choices here. Once you do that, once you choose it, it will update it automatically on Google Form. Maybe your questions look the same, but just normal. You can change the size of it as well. So you can see that's larger now. The text is still roboto. I'm going to choose a different one and I can increase it just a little bit. And of course, the colors. As you can see, the color scheme does change a little bit. You can choose which kind of background you want as well. Or you can customize and add a different color, maybe matching the color of the campus. You can do that, click on add, and notice that it just lightly changes it based on that first color choice. So the background won't be the same color as the choice that you made. It's just going to be off of these down here on the background. So I hope this video was very helpful and you have completed building your Google form for our walkthrough. If you have any questions, just email me. I'd be happy to help. And thank you so much. And hopefully you go on to the next video.